The war of words between China and the United States of America continues, with Beijing now warning of strong countermeasures against any move that damages Chinese interests. This new warning comes at a time when American lawmakers are drafting new sanctions on Chinese entities. The proposed bill will prevent Americans from investing in foreign companies linked to the Chinese army. China could be staring at major losses once the sanctions are in place. US-China relations have reached an all-time low over the past few months. Both sides are sparring over China's handling of the pandemic and the new security laws in Hong Kong. The US has provided unequivocal support for the pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. The US has stripped Hong Kong of its special status, thereby urging American investors and companies to pull out of the city-state. Despite the move, Hong Kong has said that it does not plan to change its currency's peg to the US dollar. Hong Kong's foreign secretary said that there wasn't any sudden outflow of capital since tensions first escalated. Meanwhile, throngs of people have lined up at courier outlets across Hong Kong to apply for and renew British passports, days after Britain said it's exploring options to allow citizenship to Hong Kongers. People are rushing to apply for passports that promise them overseas British nationality. Britain's proposal comes as China's legislature had approved a national security law for Hong Kong last week. We're now being joined by Andrew KP Lung for more on this story live here on WION Dispatch. Andrew, talk to us. You're seeing both America and Britain both piling on pressure by one, America removing the special trading entity status to Hong Kong, and by Britain offering citizenship to Hong Kongers.
Well, I mean, this is not surprising, really, because on the part of Beijing, it is increasingly felt that Hong Kong has now turned into a base for covert subversion. In other words, in the name of democracy, aiding and abetting the kind of protesters, or some of them are even rioters, throwing petrol bombs and also directly trashing symbols of China's sovereignty. Trampling on the national flag or throwing into the sea, but also setting fire to public buildings, storming the Hong Kong Legislative Council, and then promoting ideas and even slogans and open demands for Hong Kong's independence and separatism. And of course, those are the frontline activists are giving very high-level treatment, reception. In capitals in the United States, in Washington, D.C., as well as in London. So Beijing feels that Hong Kong is now turned into a base for subversion. And of course, at a time of all-out rivalry with the United States, the concern is even more acute. And of course, over the past 23 years, the national security safeguards originally included in Hong Kong's constitution, the law has not been enacted because of fierce opposition by the local pro-democracy legislators. And now the same local legislators are saying that, well, instead of passing the law in Beijing, such laws should be enacted in Hong Kong. But over 23 years, they have been opposing the enactment. So I think that now that this has come to pass, I think that Beijing, of course, is unlike the China, say, 20 years ago. China is, of course, much stronger economically. And if you look at the kind of sanctions, is unlikely to derail China's economic trajectory. Say that the removal of Hong Kong's special privileges to the United States, but of course Hong Kong export to the United States or trade with the United States only accounts for about 2% of Hong Kong's economy. And of course the peg of the US dollar is of course in the hands of Hong Kong. It's not in the hands of of the United States, because any country can peg the currency to any other currency. And of course, that the Hong Kong also is produce a lot of profits for American businesses. Every year, the United States has a kind of trade surplus amounting to $300 billion every year. And then, of course, a lot of the companies, United States back home, are using Hong Kong as a conduit into China, and China being a huge market. Now, as far as the kind of retaliation Beijing is threatening, of course, there are a lot of weapons in his arsenal. Don't forget, China is now the biggest purchaser of Boeing aircraft. Of course, China can shift part of the purchase to the Boeing's rival, the Airbus. And of course, China, a lot of the American agricultural exports go to China. And of course, if China cuts down some of these imports of agricultural products, this would directly hit the President Trump's political constituency. Right. So I think that there's a lot of tit for tat as far as that is concerned.
Right, but at the base of it is the fact that the claim here, be it the pro-democracy protesters or, for the matter, US or the UK, is that China is breaking the promise of one country, two systems that was given to Hong Kong when it was handed over to China. And by introducing one law after another, the protests which began about a year ago on the law which demands that the suspects in Hong Kong be extradited for trial to Chinese courts in mainland China, or be it the national security law or the national anthem law, all of these are being seen as an attempt by China to make sure there's no difference between Hong Kong and China.
Well, naturally, there is a difference, because you only need to stay in Hong Kong in one day and stay in Hong Kong in another Chinese city. You know the difference. As far as the breaking of the promise is concerned, Hong Kong still retains a very high regard as far as Hong Kong's judiciary. Hong Kong's independent judiciary enjoys a very high international reputation. And of course, that all the freedoms are still being allowed. For example, Hong Kong is home to the most vibrant anti-Beijing Chinese press. Every day, the press criticizes, so piles up the insults on President Xi Jinping, and this is allowed. It's been happening all these years. I don't think that this would worry Beijing, and I don't think that this would be disallowed in future. But what worries Beijing, of course, is national security. Now, national security, of course, is prime concern to any country in the world, including India, including the United States. And of course, there are national security laws both in India and in the United States. And because of the lack of such legislation in Hong Kong, and for 23 years, Hong Kong has failed to enact the law on its own because of fierce opposition by the so-called pro-democrats. I think that Beijing has got to resort to this as almost the last resort. But I think that at the end of the day, Beijing wants to preserve one country, two systems, because turning Hong Kong into a smaller Shanghai doesn't make sense for China.
Andrew K.P. Leung, independent international strategist, joining us live here on Beyond Dispatch. Thank you so much for being with us on the broadcast here on Beyond World as well.